I'm going to go ahead and get started with announcements. Today we have Ben Jensen with Rick Engineering, formerly Caltrans, talking about the Vineyard Drive project, the roundabout on 46 West. I'm looking forward to hearing about that. But before we get into that, we've got a couple of announcements. Our golf tournament is moving forward on October 15th. So if you're a gold sponsor, we will be reaching out to you to get your foursomes. If you want another foursome, we can also arrange that. And if you're not a sponsor, you should have received an email from Philip DeNova. If you haven't, reach out to me, let me know. We'll be distributing those flyers over the next couple weeks to try to get some participation. Speaking of sponsorships, our 2022 sponsorship program will be advertised in the coming weeks. We've made some modifications just due to COVID and not knowing what the meeting situation is going to look like. But we are hopeful we'll be able to move forward with the golf tournament and an outdoor rodeo as well, regardless of the in-person meeting situation. And then last thing on sponsorships is today we have Earth Systems sponsoring us, and I believe Rob was going to say a few words. Rob, are you on?
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it, Amy. First, I want to give credit to Dave Van Moyden for actually having his camera on. Clearly, he works for a contractor. While he may be an engineer, he's only falsely kind of pseudo an engineer. You can tell because he actually has his camera on while the rest of us hide in secrecy. But other than that, just wanted to take the opportunity to say appreciate having the moment to speak here, and really just I think that this project in particular is a really good highlight for the importance of public works in general, but just also the APWA and highlighting public works projects. Some of us have traveled through this intersection and up Vineyard Drive quite a lot. I'm gonna say it was all because of the winery projects and the wine caves that we've done up there. Maybe I went up on the weekends just to make sure everything was fine still too, but we've all, or a lot of us have traveled that intersection a lot. And while it's nice to live in a rural area where you have a stop sign in the freeway, this is definitely a significant impact to the safety of our community and everyone that comes through. And I think other than the people on this call, most people aren't driving through there thinking how spectacular the roundabout is, and we just take it for granted like the rest of the public works projects. But whether it's people coming in our local community, it really does highlight how impactful public works projects can be. So I just want to say thanks for that opportunity, and I'm excited to hear Ben talk about the rest of this project. We did a little bit of materials testing for it, but weren't involved as much as others have been. So look forward to hearing about it.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And thanks Earth Systems for your sponsorship and support. With that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to you, Ben.
All right. Thank you, Amy. I'll see. I don't see the controls popping up on my end to actually start the presentation.
Did you hover over the bottom? You should have a share screen option.
Oh, there it is. Thank you.
No problem.
All right. Thank you for your patience there, and thank you everybody for coming. Thank you for the introduction and the words of encouragement. Dave and I have been coordinating on this. This is kind of a unique opportunity where, I worked on the design side and then saw peripherally what was going on during construction. But I think this is a really unique and great opportunity to kind of get both sides of the coin in one go. I have a soft spot in my heart for APWA. The only scholarship money I ever received while I was in school was from the local chapter of APWA. And I'm hoping to get plugged in and show my appreciation from that support I received in school, hopefully here locally soon. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and start presenting on the project. Just by way of quick agenda, we're going to, introduce ourselves, kind of do a little bit of the project overview, project history and development. And then I'll talk briefly about some of the the design constraints and staging, and then gonna try and preserve plenty of time for Dave to talk about the construction staging and what they actually experience out there during construction. So this is just a little bit about me real quick. I started my career in Utah. I graduated from BYU, worked locally for a transportation company before eventually ending up at Wallace Group here in the Central Coast, and then completed this project during my time at Caltrans, and thoroughly enjoyed the time that I spent there. And I just recently jumped back out of Caltrans and accepted a new opportunity at RIC, but really feel fortunate to have spent that time at Caltrans and been able to be a part of this project.
Well, and hello, everyone. My name is Dave Van Moyden. I'm looking through the participants list here, and seems like I know maybe 30% or so of you. So it's exciting to see some of those names, and I hope for the rest of you we'll cross paths at some point during construction on a project. I'm originally from the Sacramento area, but moved down to San Luis for school at Cal Poly. I graduated in 2012 with a bachelor's degree in civil engineering. And as Rob Downs said, I'm only sort of a pseudo engineer. Construction is where my heart has been since college, and where I've been ever since. So I've only ever worked for Cal Portland Construction, working as a project engineer, and then as a project manager, and then very recently stepping into the role of general construction manager. So honored to be here with you today and try to discuss the construction constraints, and hopefully we can answer some questions too at the end. I'd love to field those if you have any particular topics you'd like to discuss on this.
All right. Thank you, Dave. Real quick, I kind of want to just get a plug in. This was a Caltrans project, a District 5 project. And in my time there, these are the vision, mission, and values of Caltrans, but we think of these things in a broad context, as an organization, but definitely reflects on the individuals and the commitment that that I witnessed in my time at Caltrans is particularly, I can't really speak to any of the other districts, but the local, team that I was fortunate to work with on Caltrans was, I think, very dedicated and very committed throughout the duration of the project. The new Caltrans director, Tokes, has 5 priorities, and I feel like this Vineyard Drive project is kind of a good representation of those priorities that Caltrans has for safety, modality, innovation, efficiency, and partnerships. We presented and worked with the public by coordinating with TAG in Templeton to make sure that they were that their voices were heard. We also coordinated on either end of this project is the county right of way, and the county was a great partner and helped us facilitate, you know, the improvements that were going to be impacting their roadways as well. So I know there are probably quite a few people who are very familiar with roundabout design, but just to cover a few quick bases, you know, there's sometimes a confusion between what is and is not a modern roundabout. So like in DC and Paris, these large traffic circles are often confused as a roundabout. And when you begin talking about them, people panic a little bit because they don't operate as efficiently or effectively as modern roundabouts. They perform a different function. So they're much bigger. There's weaving, no deflection, these kinds of things. Whereas on a modern roundabout, we typically try and get the circle as small as possible to minimize any right-of-way impacts. And it's a performance-based design. So we're looking, rather than meeting certain standard criteria, we're looking to meet, you know, the demands of the design vehicles, the sight distance, and the speeds that people are navigating the roundabout. We want to try and get everybody into as uniform a speed as possible. And Caltrans has adopted the NCHRP 672 report, which is essentially what governs all of those performance metrics. There are other manuals that we employ that kind of help shed light, since it's a little bit of a nuanced design strategy. But the NCHRP and the Caltrans HCM are the primary tools that we use for design. So jumping specifically into this project, for those of you who aren't familiar with the location, you can get to this intersection either by taking the Vineyard Drive exit off of 101 in Templeton, or heading all the way up near Paso to 46 West. And you can see those meet after you'll pass through a pretty good contingent of wine country before you get there, regardless of the route you take. So this is the same intersection in 1994. And those of you with a keen eye for transportation design will notice that the intersection has an acute angle, which for those of us who are transportation engineers, that's a daunting problem just from the get-go, because it prevents people from getting good visibility and sight distance. And that's compounded by the hill just to the east of the intersection. There's a large section of hill that's fairly steep and allows people to get some pretty good speed as they're coming through. And with this alignment, it has operated as a two-way stop historically. So in 2003, the same squad and team that I was fortunate to work with worked on a realignment project to try and remove some of that skew from the intersection. And it was a moderate improvement, but the overall safety metrics were still operating below expectations. So in 2018, 17, 18, flashing beacons were added and all-way stop. And this was a temporary stopgap to really try and reduce some of the fatalities and injuries that were being seen at the intersection. And it was effective, but it was not a long-term strategy. So that brings us to the current Roundabout project, which is a long-term fix that'll satisfy not only the needs and demands for safety, but it will also facilitate the capacity and growth, that we will see hopefully for decades to come. So when I joined Caltrans in 2018, this was the first project I picked up, and it was ready for PS&E development, so ready to advance through final design and into bidding, and worked with local hydraulic staff, landscape staff. This is obviously a very high visibility corridor. There's a lot of tourism. There's a lot of wineries in the vicinity. So there was a lot of care and thought put into not just the safety requirements of the project, but also the visual characteristics to make sure the project was not standing out or too much of an eyesore for the local community. And this sign in the bottom right corner is out there. It's on the Vineyard Drive, the northern approach, and is one of my favorite elements of the design, because you can see if you follow the sign, there's really not any direction you can go if you want to avoid the wineries. Pretty much any direction you go, you're going to hit a winery out there. This photo I included just because it highlights, the soil nail wall, the rock slope protection, or the rock blankets, everything in the local vicinity was designed with the intent, to kind of blend in with the surrounding area. And these photos are early, so you can see some of the seeding that's been done in the central island of the roundabout and in the perimeters. But I think, when the grass and the seed takes, I think everything will really blend into the surrounding area nicely. So just touching on a few of the design challenges that we faced. So when the project was bid by Cal Portland, it originally included a type 1 wall, retaining wall in the southwest quadrant of the intersection. And you can see here that the design and layout of the wall was extensive, and it was a fairly, it was a big ticket item on the construction contract. But during design, we had extensively potholed the area and knew that there was some utility facilities in the area. We did not realize that an AT&T copper phone line was actually directly located within what we had anticipated would be the type 1 wall footing. And our utility coordination process at Caltrans and working with our utility partners is extensive and could result in a hefty delay. But fortunately, internally, we had initially anticipated a reinforced stabilized slope design for this same location that did not impact right of way, but it got really close to the fence. So this was, a fairly significant issue. I feel like almost every project in design that I've been a part of that advances to construction, that the utilities come into play to some degree. And I feel like anything we can do on the coordination efforts up front, with this potholing, locating the utilities, trying to anticipate what those impacts will be. But as is the case here, sometimes there's just not really anything you can do until you start moving the dirt around and see what's actually going on out there. Cal Portland was a great partner in implementing and incorporating, this significant edit. And they also were able to effectively, the construction staging of the project was the most challenging element of the design. So when this project was initially realigned, we were able to close the Vineyard Drive accesses. But early in the project development for the Roundabout project, the commitment was made to the public and to the county that we would not close the Vineyard Drive accesses throughout the duration of construction. So this was a very challenging puzzle to solve. And I spent quite a bit of time trying to take a stab at it in design. And some of that survived, but I'll go ahead and pass things off here to Dave so he can talk more about that staging and some more of the construction criteria.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. You're right. I think even into the construction, the staging was something that was tricky, and subsequently a lot of fun for us to try to figure out. And I think we had some success with it. So I'm excited to share with you all today, what the staging originally looked like, how we were able to do some restaging and some work out of stage that ultimately led to less public impact in the future. On the next slide, Ben, I have some notes on what the original 5 stages look like. The first stage was split into 2 phases. So, we originally needed to create a temporary detour for Highway 46 westbound and eastbound traffic. That was done to the southern edge of Highway 46. It required a significant fill embankment and allowed traffic to come off of the main Highway 46 corridor, mainly to the east of the intersection. Once we did that, the second phase of stage 1 was the main portion, the bulk of the work. It was the stage that we were in the longest, and primarily was the soil nail wall in the northeastern quadrant, all of the pavement section for Highway 46 and Vineyard in that northeastern quadrant. And then there's a couple of things that I'll mention a little bit later that we were able to do in this stage that helped us down the road. Stage 2 was involved a traffic switch, a movement of K-rail, and then constructing the pavement section for Highway 46 and Vineyard in the southwest and southeast quadrants. So we were sort of straddling we're straddling Vineyard on the south side of the circle. And then we moved into a rather small stage 3, which was up in the northwest quadrant. Stage 4 was the main circle section. So at this point, the plan was to have all of traffic all still stopping at the intersection, but taking that same circular path around the future roundabout. So we had closed the entire center to construct the pavement section. And then stage 5 was originally when all of the concrete splitter islands, the curbs, sidewalks, final paving and stripe and signage was to be performed. And that would have been really a large stage originally, and significant traffic control as well. So here on this next image, I have sort of a hatched zone to show the main stages at the intersection. So stage 1, phase 2, once that temporary detour went in, it's all up in that north eastern quadrant, like we mentioned. The bulk of stage 2, again, in the southern half, and stage 3 in the upper left-hand corner there. What was important, I think, about our coordination, is we have a lot of subcontractors who need to do work in stages as well. And so this particular picture is something that we created and handed to our subcontractors. This specific one is the drainage plan, and we needed to inform our subcontractors, what the plan was for drainage, which elements we expected them to install in that stage, and which ones that would be performed at a later date. As you know, once you have a stage available, you had better do everything that there is to do in that stage, because afterwards you move traffic on there and you won't have access. And so, of course, we would hate to have a pipe missed, right, and have to sort of undermine the existing roadway to try to tie on to a section of pipe that wasn't extended out far enough in that phase. So it's a lot of communication on our part with all the subcontractors to make sure they were aware of where the staging was going to be. They came prepared with the materials to do the quantities we expected. And then on top of that, making sure that they take good references, whether with GPS or some other surveying method, to establish where they left off. Once everything is buried in that stage, all the marks are gone, and they need to essentially find where they left off and tie back into that, sort of at that interface between two stages. So I mentioned that we were looking for opportunities all along and found a couple to do things out of stage. This is a drawing that we created and sent to Caltrans for approval on a alternate stage 2, and indicated to Caltrans what traffic would look like, and making sure that everyone was aware and that the site could facilitate the traffic. So one of the things that we were able to do was construct, at least partially, and in some cases all of the splitter islands, concrete curb and gutter, and sidewalk in that stage. So sort of in the center, I have some notes there, and I know they're a little bit hard to read, and as well on 46 to the east, I have notes that says, partially installed median concrete and splitter islands. So what we're able to do is take plans like this. You've already seen a couple of our drone photos, overlay those 2 images, and get out and look ahead of the stage and see, where is traffic going to be in this next stage? If we put some of this concrete in, is it going to impact traffic? And if not, let's do it now, because that saves traffic controlled days and public convenience down the road. And so that's what we're able to do. If you click one more time, Ben, there's another image here of some of the things that we were doing. Our project engineer, Michael Borelli, put together this drawing, which again takes our drone photos of the construction during the progress, overlays the next stage traffic handling plans to give good, good information to the owner, in this case Caltrans, to say, hey, this is what it's going to look like in the next stage. Are you okay with this? Can we proceed? And I think that information ultimately led us to be able to do some of this. I think without providing these drawings, without spending the time to think about these things, we'd have ultimately had a longer duration project, potentially more traffic control at the end, which would have been flagging in pilot car, compared to doing a lot of this work behind K-rail without having to inconvenience traffic. So I have a couple lessons learned on staging, that I wanted to share. It's really important, of course, to coordinate early with the surveyor to ensure proper alignments. This project had a lot of alignments, and they were really, dictated by a stage, and that can be very helpful when you're trying to keep track and know, okay, which part are we going to actually survey? But then it also can create challenges in case the alignments between different stages don't line up. And we had a couple survey challenges, nothing too significant, but that's something to take into consideration is making sure that alignments across stages and phases match up, and you don't have surveying in stage 1 that puts K-rail here and surveying in stage 2 that puts it in a different spot. One of the things that we've shown already here is just modeling and overlaying traffic handling sheets with the stage construction sheets, and in combination with Google Earth, and even better if you can have drone photos. It really allows us to have 1 foot in the construction of the stage we're in, but then also 1 foot in the next stage, again, to make sure that we don't miss anything, for one, that we construct everything that's available to us, but then also to see what can we do out of stage, what opportunities do we have to speed up construction, to do things concurrently behind K-rail versus later down the road under traffic control. I would look for pinch points that might exist. We had one area on the eastern side of Highway 46 that was very, very close to not being physically possible to construct, to have 2 12-foot lanes and a shoulder, and have the construction zone. And it was, I would call it a potential pinch point where it fit, the design worked, but it was very difficult and very close to not fitting. So, I would call that a pinch point where if you couldn't have the 2 lanes of traffic that were required and have space for the construction zone, taking into consideration, of course, 2 feet width for K-rail, that would be something where you would need potentially a temporary detour for, like we had in stage 1, or needing to do some sort of reconstruct with a lane closure that would require something overnight, right, to close the lane and open it back up. So there's always pinch points in potential pinch points in the design. We would be looking for that. And this is a difficult one, of course, for the agencies to mandate, but it's highly encouraged for contractors to utilize GPS, a total station, drones, or other methods to really keep track of the starts and stops between stages. Of course, with Caltrans, they provide the surveying, but it's just extra helpful for us. And I don't know that we would have been so successful had we not implemented that technology to keep track of where we had been, where we're going next, and really provide greater vision to the field too. That was a big thing. Our crews are looking at paper plans on 2 dimensions, but if we can show them with a GPS model or with drone photos what the next stage is going to look like, it really helps them be more productive. They spend less time thinking about what it's going to look like and where do things go. We give them that information, and they can run with it. So that was very helpful, and I would say almost a requirement. I have a couple pictures now moving into more of our means and methods, just to highlight a couple items. On the left is a picture from stage 1, phase 2, when we're building that northeastern quadrant. And then later on the right is a picture from stage 4 as we're building the circle. I mentioned that we tried to do splitter islands ahead of time, and you'll notice on the right, there's a gravel or base section that we left out. And that was sort of, and this was part of the original design, was to leave these splitter islands out. And we just noticed, of course, the circle is meant for trailers to track out onto as they make that turn around the circle. So we need to provide some extra room during the construction of that circle so that the tractor portion of the semi can nose out and swing wide in order to not track out over our construction zone. So again, these are some of the things that go into staging to make sure traffic can fit at all times. And so that was a decision from us to leave out that portion. We knew if we put it in, we would have really hindered traffic flow through those for the large semis. On the next slide is a picture from stage 2. So now traffic is running essentially on the final alignment on Vineyard Drive, the final alignment on Highway 46 to the east, while we reconstruct the southern half. I thought what was challenging about this particular stage, and it's difficult to see from the air, but sort of right where the 2 stop markings are on Vineyard, right there. Yep, Ben. that was where 46 sort of dove off at an angle on our temporary detour route. What was challenging about that is again, on a 2D set of plans, all you have to worry about are the horizontal alignments and where are things going to cross. But out in the field, we were dealing also with vertical changes in between the design and the existing. So it just happened to be that the new design at that location was several feet higher than the existing roadway. So when we went to do the traffic switch, we ended up having a 2 to 3 foot section of base right there just to build up to pave and have that smooth transition. So just another opportunity, during the design phase to see not only how the horizontal alignments are between stages, but also are there vertical and elevation changes between existing and design during stage crossovers. So that was a fun challenge there. Wanted to talk a little bit about the soil nail wall, just because they can be a lot of fun. And if you haven't done one before, there's certainly a process, but they can be fun. So, on the left, we had Access Limited be our subcontractor for this wall. It was a team effort. They installed all of the nails, the initial shotcrete, and then we poured the facing concrete. That was the decorative part that you can see. Right at the start, they installed a few test nails, and then used some equipment here to pull on those soil nails to make sure that they withstand the design forces. So that was a verification test there on the left. That allows them to proceed on to the production nails. All of this occurs one level at a time. So we start at the highest row of nails. We create a level bench for them to put their equipment. They drill all that row, shotcrete. We come in, we excavate down to the next row of nails. They come in again and they install the second row of nails. So I have one more picture on this slide that shows that sort of interim phase after they get done with one row. We come and we lower that bench so that they have access for the next run. Once we have access and they have all the nails in, everything's shotcrete. And then we install rebar and forms for the facing. This also created some engineering challenges too, because with a typical retaining wall, a type 1 retaining wall, you can form on both sides, use some sort of tie system between the two forms to withhold the force of the concrete, and that would be a traditional forming system. On this, we only have access from one side. So this is a single side forming system. What we ended up doing is some engineering to have kind of a combined system to withhold the force of the concrete. It may be hard to see, but there's about every 4 feet up and down, there's some coil rod that we installed into the shotcrete and grouted that and used nuts and washers to hold on to the forms. And then also we have these braces, push-pull braces, going down to K-rail that we backfilled with base. So that's the system that withheld the force of the concrete until it hardened. And then on the next slide, we show the finished look on the left before the stain. And then we had a company come in, Custom Rock, and do the staining, a very intricate process. It took about a week to do this. This is, if you can believe it or not, just a rock by hand, one person doing all of this for that duration. And I think what a great job that this person did on that wall to make it look so natural. So that was very well done on that. So that's all I have, and I really wanted to take some opportunity if anyone had some construction related questions for me or for some design related questions for you, Ben. I think we can do that now.
Yeah. Thank you, Dave, for putting this all together on short notice and for sharing. maybe if I can lead off on some of the Q&A, one of the most critical elements we consider both in design and construction is those oversized vehicles. And I wonder if you actually had any experiences with some of those larger trucks, running to the wineries. Did you see anything like that out there, or was it pretty mellow?
We did. We had, a handful, usually every day, either going to the vineyards during harvest, low beds, carrying equipment to and from the coast and up to other projects. So it was really important that we prepare for them and make sure that they can make the turning movements and not fall into our hole in the middle when we're excavating for the circle, or when we had forms up. So, we were very intentional about which elements of the concrete we installed and at what time, again, just to make sure that we didn't prevent any kind of traffic movement by any vehicle out there.
Great, thank you. Does anybody else have any other questions? Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. I was just curious about the, well, anyway, really cool project. It looked really great and well done on the engineering and the construction. But I was just wondering about the middle of the island, and maybe you said something about it and I missed, but with all the drought conditions and everything, it seemed like that middle of that roundabout would be a perfect spot for a stormwater infiltration facility. Was any thought given to that, or during the design?
Yeah, typically the central island is kind of it's a no man's land. It's designed, to be utilized by the oversized vehicles in that. But internally at Caltrans, talking to our maintenance personnel, they don't like having facilities located in that central island that need to be regularly maintained and cleaned out. They intentionally didn't want to put their maintenance personnel, in a position where they could be at risk. And typically we from a design perspective don't put those kinds of facilities, if we can avoid it, in that central island. It's tempting because it's a wide open area to try and put some treatment in there, but it can also be problematic for, if there's an errant driver that goes through that central island, it could potentially be problematic. So we typically steer clear of that.
Hey, Ben, this is Aaron.
Thank you.
Also, there's typically a little bit of a mound in the central island because traffic safety does not want headlights to go through it. So they want something to deflect headlights as they approach. So there's usually a little bit of a hump in that area as well.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Thank you, Aaron. That's also a good point. It is, if you're on the ground level and arrive at the roundabout, you'll see it's kind of there's quite a bit of presence from the soil in that there that's meant to obstruct your view and the oncoming headlights from people coming the other direction. Any other questions?
I think there may have been a question in the chat.
Okay, the lack of the marked crosswalks. No, per California vehicle code, even if a crosswalk is not marked, it's a legal crosswalk. And as you mentioned, there's not likely to be a high volume of pedestrian traffic out there. There are a fair amount of cyclists who navigate through this intersection. And we did provide facilities on all the approaches so that if bikes want to exit rather than travel through the roundabout, they can do so. But the decision was made to eliminate the painted crosswalks due to there being a very low to no expected pedestrian volumes out there. And that decision was made by the traffic safety personnel. It eliminates, you know, again, having to maintain the paint out there. Hopefully that answers your question.
I had a question, Ben. This is Leroy Cadena. During the phases, did you have to eliminate or illuminate the area at night for vehicles to maneuver through the construction site?
Yeah, so I was working with our internal electrical staff at Caltrans, and I know our intent was to install as much of the illumination as early in the project as possible, because yes, it's definitely a concern. In fact, one of the mornings I was out there, there was signs of somebody's taillight or something near the K rail, but if somebody had hit the rail, they had fled the scene. There was no other record of it. So I know that that was a bit of a challenge, but actually I would ask Dave if they had any special illumination requirements or took that into consideration.
I think, like you said, Ben, we just tried to schedule it to leave the existing lighting and flashing beacons as long as possible, and then install the new electrical as soon as possible. But there were gaps in which, you know, the existing intersection would have been without overhead illumination for periods of time. And that could be a good consideration to have, you know, more clearly indicated in plans and specs to have that. It's an interesting idea.
Yeah, that's helpful information on my end, because I know that that was the intention, but I don't know that that was clearly communicated with the electrical staff, and I don't know if it was clear in the construction documents, but that's a great question. Have you had any experiences with that, Leroy?
No, I was just looking at this site and thinking, you know, that how rural it is. And you were talking about the grade and the speed, and I was just kind of wondering if, you know, if there had been a concern or thoughts about providing, you know, temporary lighting during construction for vehicles passing. You know, we have similar projects, and it just kind of stood out to me. So I was kind of interested to see if it had been considered in the planning.
Yeah, it's an important consideration.
There would have to have some sort of temporary illumination too, because at some point you do have to remove the existing facilities. I mean, for example, even in this picture here, you know, the existing street light, which would have been in the northeast corner, was somewhere around the yellow stripe near that near the signs, you know, so it's way out, a little bit down. Down from there, Ben. Keep going down. Keep going down with other way.
Oh.
Up.
Oh, right there.
And it like on the circle itself. Yeah, like in there to the right on the circle, on the JPCP, the existing street light at the intersection. So, you know, that had to been removed in stage 1, phase 2.
Right.
But we left what we could for as long as possible, and then put what we could back as soon as possible.
Another question in the chat regarding the TI and the structural section design. There was no JPCP or jointed plain concrete pavement on this project outside of that, of what's shown in the truck apron, the flatter spot within the circulatory roadway, the concrete there. The TI that we used was 9.5, and it was a 20-year design life for the pavement structural section.
Section, I think if I remember correctly, Ben, ended up being basically the 6 inches of base, then lean concrete base, and then 4/10 of asphalt.
Yeah, I think it was 1.5 feet of sub base, and then that's right, there was lean concrete base underneath the HMA. So
yeah, 1.2 of sub base. That's right.
Yeah.
And then 6 inches of lean.
Yeah, so it's a pretty sturdy section. The lean concrete base, I believe, was a little bit of a challenge too, because that's almost, the same as placing concrete to some degree.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, thank you for the questions and your time. Does anybody have any other questions, comments, suggestions?
Hey, David, this is Aaron at Caltrans. Is there any chance I can get a copy of all those pictures and everything that you have, or any of the drone video or anything?
Yeah, we'd be happy to distribute some of that.
That'd be great if I could get a copy of that and stuff. And just to give a shout out for Ben, Ben also is the project engineer on a roundabout that's going on. They'll be going out to construction for 25 and 156, which will be the second turbo roundabout in the country. So he was a great loss to Caltrans. He was a great engineer to work with. I was the project manager on this project, and I'm also the project manager on the other one. So he's got a lot of knowledge and a really good guy to work with.
Thank you, Aaron. I really appreciate that. And genuinely, this project, Aaron, the other people that I had the privilege to work with at Caltrans, it's definitely one of the brightest spots in my career. So I appreciate that. And hopefully if everything goes right, we'll have a presentation on the turbo at some point as well. I'm excited about that one. And I'm happy to hear that Aaron's the PM on that. That's great.
There is a question about what the landscape, it was in the chat, the type of landscaping that was in the center or what's planned. Is there any plans for it?
Oh, thank you. I missed that. Yeah, these photos, these were provided by Cal Portland, and these were taken shortly after the seeding was applied. So our landscape staff designed or designated local wild seed that's drought tolerant and low maintenance. So while this the Central Island looks black now, what actually will be there, hopefully, and not too long, will be some grass like you see, adjacent to this area. And I believe Dave has, I don't know, I think we had a 2-year plant establishment on this. Was it 1 or 2 years? So there's probably,
it might be 1. I don't know. I sometimes with the plant establishment, I get my projects mixed up.
yeah, it's easy to forget, but somebody's, I guess, keeping tabs on the grass out there. So
yeah, we have KCI Environmental as our subcontractor for all the landscape planting, and so they come out on a weekly or bi-monthly basis to perform watering
I'm going to go ahead and plant the seed that Ben provide a module or presentation on a turbo roundabout. We got people Googling turbo roundabout as we speak. So it is a absolutely new concept in California, but unfortunately, Florida, wasn't it Florida, Ben, that beat us to the punch?
Yeah.
I don't like saying that out loud, but yeah, Florida beat us to the punch, and it's very prevalent in the Netherlands. But Ben, just promoting your next APWA or ASCE presentation.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. It was actually while I was at Caltrans, Paul invited me to a TRB webinar on turbo roundabouts, and I was stuck on a. We have another intersection with much, much higher truck and vehicular volumes with an acute angle, and it was really challenging. So a turbo roundabout essentially is for a multi-lane roundabout design. So it's a roundabout with multiple lanes, but you isolate each individual lane with a mounded curb. So really the characteristics of a turbo roundabout are there's no deflection on the entry. Each individual lane is segregated so they're to discourage weaving, and then it's spiraled as well. So if you start on the inside lane, you will have to take a left turn. You can't stay in there for a full U-turn. So, and I'd be happy to follow up with that. I obviously won't have the value of the construction experience there, but maybe Aaron will help us out there.
Well, thank you, Ben. We got to wind down and we still have a raffle to go through, but we want to thank you, Ben and David and Aaron for this great presentation. And with that, let's see, I'll try and share my screen so we can see the raffle. Oops, what did I do? Okay. Oops, let me turn that off. Turn that. There we go. Oops. Is everybody able to see the wheel spinning here?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay. Here we go. All right, Kyle Anderson is our winner. What is our gift certificate today, Amy?
We have a variety for your choosing. So we'll have Andrea be in touch, Kyle, and you'll get your, I think it's a $25 gift certificate.
And Ben and Dave will be sending, I think we have some APWA mugs for you guys.
Yes.
And we appreciate your presentation today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
See you at the golf tournament.
Thank you all. Thanks, Amy and Leroy, for the opportunity.
Okay, this concludes our meeting. Thank you, everyone.